loss is compounded over time. And we experience a lot of different types of losses. Death and divorce being the most common ones that we know of. So by the age of 2, we actually start becoming aware of loss. And this is small, but this is significant, is that the reason we call kids the terrible 2s and the fearsome 4s is because of the losses that they've experienced. So mom has been taking care of them, feeding them, nurturing them. Now by the time they're 1.5, 2, they're having to do things on their own. They don't like it. They want comfort. And now they're getting disciplined for not doing the things. So that is a loss for them. It's a small loss, but I'm just trying to give you an idea of, like, we all experience some kind of loss. And that comfort that you receive from mom, dad, it's a loss for kids because now they're having to mature and grow. But their loss can be compounded if it's not handled well. So from 2 on up, we start experiencing different types of loss. So that could be connection with mom and dad. It could be in childhood not having friends, being bullied, kids not playing with you on the playground. Teachers might single you out for something and it makes you feel fearful or insecure, right? Like, all of those things are a loss. It could be a loss of trust, a loss of safety. It could be that you moved a lot. You know, I think military families experience this, especially kids that move a lot. I was a child that moved every single year. Year renters, so went to a lot of different elementary schools. So there was a lot of loss there. The change of familiar patterns of behaviors, right? You go from elementary school to middle school. That's a change. You might lose some friends because of new friend groups. College to careers, and then change of jobs. Familiar patterns and behaviors could even be, I think the pandemic is a lot of safety loss here, that we don't always feel safe. We don't feel safe going in the grocery store. We don't feel safe sending our children to school. We fear the germs. So there's a lot of trust and safety there, a lot of loss in that area. Finances can be a loss. Job security is a loss. Unmet expectations is a huge loss, especially in relationships, dating, marriage, roommates, right? Unmet expectations. So what happens with these different types of loss is it gets built up, it's compounded. And especially if it's something that you've experienced the loss, but it's just been buried, it's never really been brought out, dealt with. And so when these types of losses start piling up, it starts to affect us. So it could be, like I said before, reduced energy, not being able to really concentrate. Children who have experienced death in the family when they go to school, they have a hard time engaging in school. They have reduced concentration. Maybe no one's really talked them through what that death really meant to them. I know for me, my mom was in a motorcycle accident when I was 9 years old. She was paralyzed from the waist down, but she was also a young mom, and so she wasn't around a lot. So I had this compounded loss of not having my mom around a lot of different family members watching us. And then she's in a motorcycle accident, she's in a coma, and no adult came to talk to me or my sister about it, about how we were feeling. And so I felt a lot. And so I went and I hid in a car and cried by myself. So I had all of this loss that I was experiencing, but I didn't know what to do with all of that. And then, as I grow up and I start experiencing other types of loss, and some similar to those emotional feelings that I had with my mom, it just kept layering on top of each other. So now I'm married, have children, and all these little losses that I feel start spilling out. I'm experiencing similar losses in my relationship in my marriage, but my past losses, they start manifesting themselves into feeling like my present moment losses, my present life losses are bigger than what they really were, because all my loss just compounded, and it just made me feel a lot. So, we can have all types of different types of loss, but if it's unresolved, it just piles up. You get to the point where you cannot either function, or it drives anxiety high, or it drives overreactions to things very high. So there's unresolved loss, and then there's loss that we experience, but we talked it through, we dealt with, and those are the ones that really don't impact us. It's the ones that are really left unresolved. So I know this is a lot of information being thrown at you on grief. My goal is to help you navigate through these challenging times. So I've provided for you a free grief guide handbook. This guide gives over 50 tips on the experience of grief and how to help ourselves and people around us through it. So please download the guide on the link below. It is really helpful to understand this topic, since we are not really taught or educated on grief. So I hope this guide will be a useful tool for you. So other types of losses that you can go from single to getting married, and then feeling disappointed in unmet expectations in that marriage. You didn't realize that this person was not as tidy as you thought they were. Sometimes, in a dating relationship, sometimes we do. We put our best foot forward. And when we get married, we see, the real person. Or maybe we just haven't been taught to talk vulnerably or to sacrifice for the other person. So there could be hurt, there could be pain there. And then you go from the marriage to then having children, and that changes a lot of the dynamic. So then as you are having your children, different losses that you can experience there is just not feeling like an equipped parent. When your kids go off to kindergarten, there's a loss because you were attached to each other, or you were together a lot, and now they're growing up, and so just that change of, again, the familiar pattern, they're not there all the time. Then there's also the children that are born with special needs. There's all kinds of different types of loss that happens there. Well, a lot of us, when we're pregnant, we have this idea of what typical is going to look like, and when it doesn't look like that, we don't know what to do with that yet. And so you're experiencing a lot of different types of loss in that, anticipating what life is going to look like with that, caring for special needs. And then there could be, as you are trying to work through and navigate through parenting, especially when they become teenagers, teenagers displaying their independence and if they're making bad choices, it feels personal. And so there's loss in that. There's loss in when they grow up and go off to college and you're an empty nester. I know personally for me as a mom, I felt I was forced into retirement and I wasn't ready to retire. And as a mom, you devote yourself to their care, to raising. They become, in a sense, an identity for you. So identifying what that loss was key for me to knowing how to work through it. And I think that's true whether it's a parent with a special needs or a parent with a teenager or a marriage. It's identifying what specific loss you're experiencing, and not so much that the other person is to blame. It's that we had an expectation and it was not met. And that's not the other person's fault. That's, just no one's at fault. It's that just the truth of it is. And so you deal with the truth. You deal with what that was for you. What was the truth for you? And then that's when our loss is discovered, then we can come up with a plan. But if you don't know what the loss is, then you're just stuck. You're stuck in the pain, you're stuck. And what that will do is it will make you believe that this is the best it's gonna get. It's never gonna get any better. And you're stuck in this situation, and it's the other, we can blame the other person. But really it's that you're experiencing a loss, and when you can identify that loss, you can come up with a plan. you can be more vulnerable with that person. You can talk through issues. You can get the right type of help that's going to help you work through. If it's a special needs, you'll know specifically what my specific loss is that I'm feeling with my children. Other types of losses that we can experience in relationships when it relates to unmet expectations. It could be with a boss who's supposed to mentor you. It could be with a coach. It could be a specific pastor, minister, clergyman who you had an expectation and they did not meet that expectation. They disappointed you in some way. Again, you want to identify, what is that disappointment? What did you feel? I'll always come back to the truth, right? Like, we can only heal and recover when we actually meet all of this with the truth. So there's what they did, but then there's just being truthful with yourself of like, what expectation did you have? And that's where you're going to discover specifically what your loss is. Sometimes we get caught up in the story of our loss. So here's what I mean by that. I had a surgery. I had to stay 2 nights in the hospital. I was in a lot of pain, and I kept calling the nurse to let them know that I was in a lot of pain. And on top of it, this is probably TMI, but my catheter was wrapped around and kinked. And so it was causing me a lot of spasms and pain. So I'm calling and they're like, okay, I'll send your nurse in. Okay, I'll send your nurse in. And it felt like hours before she got there. And when she came in, she was super angry with me because I kept calling. And I was devastated. Like, one, I'm in so much pain. 2, emotionally, like, I just felt very vulnerable. I'm needing help. She wasn't being very comforting or helpful. So when the shift changed and I got my new nurse, and the new nurse came in, and I am like sobbing and telling them what happened. But not only to that nurse, then when my husband got there, I told him that story. And I was camped out on the nurse and what she did because I wanted everyone to hear my loss. I didn't even know what my loss was, but I wanted everyone to hear the story. So when we get caught in this story, it's really that we're trying to help someone to see, like, this was huge. I had an expectation of actually being taken care of, and she did not meet that expectation. And I did not feel safe, and I did not feel protected. And so that was the loss I was experiencing. But it took me, I don't know, after about 3 days of like telling this story, I finally realized that I have not really identified what loss I'm experiencing in this. So once I identified the fact that I didn't feel protected by her and I didn't feel safe, that story, I was not stuck in my story anymore. So when we're stuck in our story, it's because we've not identified our pain, our loss. So once I could identify the pain and the loss, I was no longer stuck in my story. I actually could move forward. So identifying that I did not feel safe and I did not feel protected, I was able to let go and not feel this anger and rage toward the nurse, the doctor, the hospital, my husband, and was able to, okay, now what I feel is more vigilant toward people who are going to be in the hospital, that they should always have someone spend the night with them and be their voice when they cannot be a voice, right? That's an idea of a specific type of unmet expectation, but the importance of recognizing what that loss is so it doesn't have the same power over me or over you. So now you know a little bit more about different types of losses. In this video right here, I am going to talk about how to identify different types of losses in your relationships. So watch this video and I'll see you over there.